good morning, my name is Council. At the time it reads 8 a.m. I will call the meeting to order. Council, in accordance with section 3691 of the Local Government Act and clause 6.1 of the Code of Meeting Practice, I now request the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Pride, to chair the meeting on my behalf. I will remain in attendance during the duration of the meeting and vote. Thanks, Councillor Pride.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
And we'll commence the meeting, and we'll start with the General Manager for reading of the advice concerning recording a meeting.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, this council meeting is being recorded in accordance with the council's webcasting of council meeting policy. The recording will be archived and made available for viewing at any time on council's YouTube channel for a minimum period of 12 months. All care is taken to maintain your privacy. However, if you are in attendance in the public gallery, you should be aware that your presence may be recorded. Your continued attendance means that you agree to being recorded and also that you will abide by the council's adopted code of meeting practice. The chairperson or general manager have the discretion to interrupt the recording of any meeting at any time should it be deemed necessary. This may occur in circumstances where commentary is considered to be misleading, defamatory or inappropriate to be published, or where behaviour breaches council's adopted code of meeting practice. Councillors and senior staff are reminded that this meeting is being live streamed, and for the benefit of those viewing online, please ensure you use the microphone when speaking and turn it off when you are finished.
Thank you very much. We'll commence the meeting, and can I ask anybody who's able to please stand for the prayer and acknowledgement of country. Almighty God, give wisdom to those in authority and guide all peoples in the way of righteousness and peace, so that we may share with justice the resources of the earth, work together in trust and seek the common good. Amen. I'd like to acknowledge that this meeting is being held on the traditional lands of the Wiradjuri people and recognise the strength, resilience and capacity of Aboriginal people in this land. We can now be seated. General Manager, are there apologies or approvals for video link?
Deputy Mayor, I have one request from Councillor Taylor to attend by audio-visual link.
Great. Councillors, can I get a mover and a seconder for Councillor Taylor, Councillor Wright, Councillor West? Is there any discussion? There being none, I'll put it. Those for, those against, it's carried. Declarations of interest, are there any, General Manager?
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I've received no declarations of interest.
Thank you. We'll move to item 6, Recision motions. 6.1, Recision motion, internal loan. Item 8.2.10, ordinary council meeting, 18 June 2025. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Councillor Wright, Councillor Orban. Is there any discussion on the item? None? Oh, Councillor Cranston.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to start by briefly addressing why we took this step, because I do know that some have questioned whether it was necessary. Rescission motions are a legitimate tool available to councillors when a decision needs to be revisited, particularly where clarity was lacking or where key information wasn't fully understood at the time of the vote. This motion is about consistent, transparent governance. It's not about undermining advice, not about resisting financial responsibility, and it's not about playing politics. The report described a short-term contingency, a fallback if the financial assistance grant was delayed. But the letter to the Minister outlines something completely different, a 5-year, $10 million internal loan potentially repaid from land sales. That's not a minor detail. That is a fundamentally different financial instrument with a different risk profile. Governance lives in the resolution. It doesn't live in the assumptions, and it certainly doesn't live in emails or intentions after the fact. In this case, the resolution, the report and the letter didn't line up, and then the numbers changed. from negative 2 million to negative 6.4 back to 2.19 negative, the last two within the span of one meeting. That should have triggered a deferral. I've spoken to external board members since and the feedback was blunt. This should never have gone to the vote in that state. When explanations start relying on phrases like, I think the intention was, or I believe it meant, that's not governance, that's risk. Even amongst the 3 councillors who signed this rescission motion, we couldn't agree on what was actually approved. Was it a loan, a facility, a line of credit? Have we given the GM a cheque for $10 million with no further oversight? Were we talking days, 5 years? And the numbers, as said, they kept shifting too. That alone justifies the rescission. We asked for deferral, we asked for clarity, we tried to move an amendment simply to confirm that what was being approved matched the report. That wasn't allowed. And we didn't call this meeting. Council could have brought forward a revised report with a clear resolution. Instead, the burden to fix the confusion has fallen back on councillors, and this rescission motion is the only mechanism we had. Since lodging it, we've had constructive conversations with senior finance staff and the executive. We now understand the intent under 8.2.10 was much narrower than the minister's letter implied, a short-term cash flow buffer, triggered only if the financial assistance grant isn't received by 30 June. That's helpful clarity, but governance isn't about trusting the vibe. It's about having the facts clearly stated, adopted and understood. I'll be supporting this rescission motion, not because I expect it to succeed, but because it puts on record the real intent, and it makes clear if anything broader is proposed, it must come back to council. Councillor Wright and I will bring a notice of motion in July to formally clarify 8.2.10. That wasn't possible today, and frankly, with final conversations with the GM only happening at 5 p.m. yesterday, it would have been inappropriate to table something at the last minute. And finally, for those that have called this a waste of time, I'd argue the opposite. What costs council is poor process. What we've done here is raise the standard for councillors, for the executive and for the community. And respectfully, I'd ask that if anyone likes to speak, that they be able to. If we don't expect clarity from ourselves, we cannot expect trust from the community later.
Thank you, Councillor. Would anybody else like to speak on this item? Councillor Wright.
First, I'd like to pick up on something Councillor Cranston raised, which is a very real issue of new material information that's come to light since last week. So as councillors, we're now all aware that formal communications have been received from an agent acting on behalf of a developer who's highly interested in engaging with our council, potentially about purchasing portions of residentially zoned land and exploring commercial arrangements that might align with our financial goals. Whilst this won't resolve the June 30 deficit, I understand that, it could significantly ease the alarm around the need for this $10 million loan. There are real opportunities before us in the next financial year that could put us in a much stronger position. Exploring these options is a key part of our financial sustainability plan and a directive of the committee. Of course, council would need to follow a competitive, transparent process like an expression of interest to secure best value. I understand that. But the point is, this is a conversation that must happen, and it must happen now. Whether via outright sale or a joint venture, this interest is potentially game-changing for council's balance sheet. And I do look forward to hearing from the Financial Committee about how these discussions will progress. Second, I want to echo Councillor Cranston's observations about last week's decision. Even though we were all present at the same meeting, when we asked councillors afterwards what they thought they just approved, no one actually had the same answer. It's the loan structure, its repayment source, even its purpose. None of it was clear. That is exactly why this rescission motion was brought. And going into July, if the loan is to proceed, we plan to tighten its governance. Specifically, and I appreciate the General Manager's indication yesterday afternoon that this is a sensible request, any application to use the $10 million for anything other than meeting the end-of-year deficit must come back to Council for a separate report and resolution. That's what proper oversight looks like. And just to be clear, these amendments could have been brought by the Mayor today as a new item, but we understand it didn't meet the threshold under an emergency item, so that's why we're doing it at the July meeting. So lastly, and more importantly, my view on this decision hasn't changed. One of the biggest reasons I cannot support going ahead with this loan as originally presented is that based on conversations with executive staff, I actually understand the risk of receiving a performance improvement order is extremely low. Given running a short-term cash deficit for a few months is not going to put us into administration or cost us our roles as councillors. And knowing this, and knowing there is a real potential to divest assets and improve our cash position without this borrowing, I'm not comfortable voting in favour of a $10 million facility at this stage. My position is that I will support the rescission motion, and if the loan is eventually approved, which I expect it will be, I will advocate for strict terms to protect this council, our ratepayers and our financial credibility. Additionally, in my last point, the other key reason I support this rescission is that, quite simply, past performance and what we choose to prioritise matter. Hindsight is 20/20, but I look at the decisions that have put us in this position. Two straightforward examples stand out. First, the $1.45 million spent to acquire another property on Mount Panorama, which settled in December 2024 and directly worsened our June financial position today. And second, the failure to properly manage our wages. We are forecasting blowing our wages budget by nearly $2 million. Between these two examples alone, had we acted more prudently, we would potentially not be facing a deficit at all. It's not just about the fag. To my mind, approving this $10 million loan without serious scrutiny only enables, even encourages, poor performance and questionable decision making. I cannot support that, especially knowing how closely our community is watching us right now.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Councillor Gulliver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I want to say I support the rescission motion because of what happened last week. Councillors were confused about the different information and the financial numbers put in front of them. I felt very rushed and it was messy and it was not a good space for me to be in. I agree good governance is non-negotiable and the rescission motion sends a firm message about the important matters that should be dealt with appropriately. I believe all councillors would agree with that. Everything Councillor Wright and Cranston have said, I believe, is correct. New information has presented itself and clarity has been provided on what was approved. I want to say, whilst that hasn't done enough for me to change my position on this matter, I recognise it could have tried to buy some time, and that's what I've been about. I would also like to state for the record that I voted based on the report to the council, not to the letter to the minister. So the concerns that the community has about governance and the oversight of the loan will be addressed in the motion plan for July. We need to bring the community together with us. We need to get the finances right, from cost cutting to grant application to revenue drivers and council efficiencies. And we need to identify between needs and wants in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gulliver. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Orban.
Quickly, thanks, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Still worries me how we could have voted to take $10 million out of an account that only has $7 million in it, leaving that account in a $3 million in the red. I mean, where's the business acumen in here? Let's sit down, let's have a look at this, let's vote for this rescission motion so we can get on the front foot. And that's what I'm all about here, is getting this council on the front foot. We're only going backwards doing this other one. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak on the item? There's no further discussion. I'll put the rescission motion. Those for the rescission motion? 3. Those against? Okay, the rescission motion's not carried. It's lost. Item 7, thanks for attending. Sorry it's early. Meeting closed at 8:14. Thank you.